in this session, I'll kind of give a brief overview of the GMAT and kind of what's changed from the previous version and what's new. So a little bit about the Leland platform and a little bit about myself. So Leland is a platform where people like myself who are experts in coaching can come in and provide those services. So I'm not actually an employee of Leland. I'm like an independent contractor, and I have my coaching services through the platform. A little bit about myself. I am a GMAT Focus Edition expert. I've had many number of clients who have booked one-on-one coaching with me, who've then been able to improve on their GMAT score and then take the GMAT and then reach very favorable outcomes. A little bit about my background. I was previously in RNA sciences at Moderna Therapeutics. I was also a business analyst at Capital One, and most recently, I'm currently a product manager at Mercor. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started. So today we'll look into what is the GMAT Focus Edition. We'll look at the exam overview. We'll look at some of the topics that are covered. We'll also look at how the exam is scored and what to expect on test day. So the GMAT Focus Edition is typically, it stands for the Graduate Management Admissions Test, and the new Focus Edition is what the FE stands for. It's used by top business schools in their MBA admissions process alongside the GRE. So the new GMAT Focus Edition replaces the classic version of the old GMAT. The new Focus Edition has been made to be shorter, has been made more modern, and has been kind of focused on more business relevant skills that are more indicative of your success in business school. It has a new streamlined approach. There's no analytical writing assessment on the new GMAT FE, and there's no sentence correction. It's been narrowed down from having 4 sections to only having 3. Now, if you're considering between the GMAT and the GRE, business schools in particular do not have a preference between the GMAT and the GRE. 2 important things to note here is that the GMAT is typically only used for business school admissions, whereas the GRE may be more flexible and can be used for kind of other graduate level applications. And so they are 2 different tests. And so what I do recommend for people who might perform better on one than the other, if you are interested in applying to business school, they don't have a preference between the 2. Would I recommend studying for both? That's a really good question. I'd probably say no, for the reason that it really depends on your individual situation. It's probably better to spend all of your time, money, focus, energy on one test and really honing in that test and understanding the narrow intricacies of that test, rather than trying to kind of learn both exams, learn the content, learn the strategy, learn how to approach and tackle those exams. It's probably better to spend all of your focus and energy on one. And so that's what I recommend to my clients who I've had in the past, who ask me, would you recommend studying for both? I'd probably say no. I'd probably recommend, if, like, let's say you took the GMAT and you didn't score as well. I'll do a diagnostic with them. I'll look at, what kind of skills do they have that are really good? What skills maybe need more improvement? And kind of aligning that with the GRE to really understand, like, okay, is this, indicative that you'll do better on the GRE, or should we kind of focus more on the GMAT? Does that answer your question? Awesome. Okay. So we'll move on now to the exam outline. So on this GMAT Focus Edition, it's a total of 2 hours and 15 minutes of exam time with an additional optional 10-hour break. And so kind of the way that I'll kind of talk about how this kind of plays out in section order, but you'll have 3 sections on the GMAT Focus Edition. You'll have the quantitative reasoning, or the math section. You'll have the verbal reasoning, and you'll also have data insights, which is kind of the newest section here. Each section will be 45 minutes. 45 minutes times 3 gets to 2 hours and 15 minutes. At the end of each section, once you've finished all of the questions, if you still have time left over within that 45 minutes, you will be allowed to go back and review any questions, and you'll be able to change up to 3 answers. This is only if you have time within the allotted 45 minutes for that section. And so just make sure that if it's possible that if you have a question that you're not so sure about, you can make a note of it and come back to it if you have time left over. What's really unique about the new GMAT is the flexibility of this exam. So before you start the exam, you'll actually indicate the order that you want to take the test in. Excuse me. So what that means is you can, right before you start the test, you can say, okay, I want to do the verbal section and then quant and then data. Or I want to do data first and then quant and then verbal. You can choose any order. However, once you've started the exam and once you've started the first section, you cannot change that order. The only thing that you can do is choose when to take that optional 10-minute break. So let's say after the first section, your brain is kind of fried. You're like, okay, I want to take this break just to kind of reset. That's totally okay. Or if you want to do 2 sections in a row and then take a break before you do the third one, that's completely fine too. One thing to note here is that the GMAT Focus Edition is question adaptive, meaning that answering a question correctly will increase the difficulty of the next question. And so with kind of all of these to note, the new GMAT is highly flexible. You can adapt the exam to exactly how you've prepared for it, which gives you more opportunities to perform at your absolute best. And that's what I really like about the GMAT is they're really giving you every single opportunity to kind of get that highest score. I'll now move on to talk about some of the topics that are covered. On the quantitative reasoning section, you'll have 45 minutes to do 21 questions. The topics covered are kind of a wide variety of topics. You'll have word problems, you'll have arithmetic and algebra, you'll have number theory, you'll also have statistics and probability. One thing to note here is that answering these questions correctly doesn't necessarily rely on having really strong math skills. Instead, it relies more on those underlying logic and analytical skills rather than math. You are not allowed to use a calculator on the quantitative reasoning section. And in addition, you will not be tested on geometry. This quant section is really important, and top business schools care a lot about the quant section more than they do other sections, because this tests for skills that are relevant for business logic and numerical fluency. Looking at a practice question, this is kind of the type of question that you'll get. You'll have directions, which are kind of the same for all the questions. And then you'll have a question and you'll have 5 answer choices, and you'll be asked to kind of solve this. Having 45 minutes for 21 questions is approximately 2 minutes per question. And so kind of that's the timing that you should kind of take going into this exam. Now, looking at the verbal reasoning section, here you'll have 45 minutes to answer 23 questions. There are 2 types of questions on the verbal section, and I'll kind of get into what those look like in a moment. You'll have reading comprehension, which involves a larger paragraph and answering a few questions, multiple questions for it back to back. The topics covered here are about main idea, supporting idea, application, logical structure, and style. You'll also have critical reasoning questions in which you'll get a very short paragraph, maybe 1 to 2 sentences long, and you'll only have 1 question for that. The topics covered here involved making arguments, evaluating arguments, and formulating and evaluating a plan of action. One key thing to note here is that sentence correction has been removed from the GMAT entirely. Looking at a reading comprehension question, this is the type of question that you'll get. You'll have a passage of about 2 to 3 paragraphs in length, and you'll get a few questions back to back. You won't be able to see those questions all at once. You'll see 1 question at a time, but you'll have about 3 to 4 questions from the same passage. Then you'll also have critical reasoning questions. As you can see here, the paragraph is a lot shorter and is only about 1 to 2 sentences in length. And then you'll have a question here that asks you, and you'll have 5 answer choices. One thing to note here is the way that the verbal section is laid out is you'll alternate every 3 to 4 questions between one reading comprehension passage and multiple critical reasoning questions. Moving on to data insights. This is the newest section. Here you'll have 45 minutes to answer 20 questions. There are 5 different types of questions, and they all look very different. So we'll kind of go into that in a moment. But I wanted to kind of preface this by talking about an understanding of what data is. Think of data as pieces of information. Some can be qualitative and some can be quantitative. Questions for the data insight section may require math, data analytics, verbal reasoning, or any combination of the 3. You'll be allowed to use an on-screen calculator for this section of the exam, and it'll be provided for you on screen. So do not bring your own calculator. You won't be permitted to use it here. The data insight section is also very important because it measures your ability to analyze and interpret data and apply it to real-world business scenarios. It also measures digital and data literacy, which is one of the most relevant and in-demand skills for business schools today. Looking at the different types of questions, the first type of question is data sufficiency. Here, you're given a really long set of instructions, but to kind of break it down for you, you're given a question and then you're given 2 pieces of information. And your job is to determine whether or not those pieces of information, either independently or together, are enough to answer that underlying question. The next type of question you'll see is a table analysis. I want to preface this by saying that the data insight section is actually probably the most interactive section. You'll have a question and you'll have a table here, and you'll actually be able to use this dropdown to sort the data by the different columns. And so the dropdown, it'll say sort by, and then you can sort by production world share, rank, exports share, and exports rank. You'll then be asked 3 different statements, and you'll be asked to select yes if it can be shown as true or no if it's not true. Moving on, you'll also have graphical interpretation questions where you'll have a graph and you'll have 2 different, statements to analyze. In this, you don't necessarily have answer choices. Instead, you'll have drop downs where you can kind of see a number of different options, and you'll be asked to select the correct drop down for each of the statements based on the graph. You'll also have 2-part analysis where you'll have a passage, and then you'll be asked to make 2 selections, one for each column, based on the different answers. What I want to highlight here is that the data analytics section is a combination of both quantitative and qualitative reasoning. So this question, while it may seem that there's no math involved, there is data analysis involved. You're asked to understand the different pieces of information and then analyze them. And that's why this question will show up on the data analytics section. The last type of question you'll have is multi-source reasoning, where you'll be given 3, multiple different sources or pieces of information, and you'll be given different questions to be asked on them. For this one, you'll be given, in this example, you're given 3 different emails, and you'll be able to click on the different tabs on the exam to open up those different emails. And you'll be given, for these, you'll be given 2 to 3 questions based on the same set of multiple sources. And so that's kind of an overview of what the 3 different sections look like. I'll pause for questions here before moving on to talking about scoring and then test day itself. All right, awesome. So moving on to looking at scoring, the GMAT is scored in a kind of new way. Each section will be scored from 60 to 90, and each section will be weighted equally in your overall score. The new GMAT Focus Edition scores, all of them will end in 5, and the range will go from 205 to 805. Like I mentioned, all 3 sections are weighted equally in your final score. One important thing to note here is that 645 is the new 700. The scores on the new GMAT Focus Edition correspond to different percentiles as compared to the classic GMAT. The 90th percentile on the new GMAT Focus Edition is a 645, whereas on the old classical edition, it was a 700. So a lot of people are interpreting this as it might be easier to score higher on the GMAT, on the new GMAT FE. Looking at test day, you actually have two different options for how you take the GMAT test. You can either take the exam online from the comfort of your own home or in a testing center. One important thing to note here is that they will both be on a computer. If you choose to take it at home, you will not be allowed to use scratch paper. Instead, you may use a whiteboard to make any notes or calculations. And at the end of each section, you must erase it. The exam will be proctored, and you'll take it on a computer. Either if you take it at home, you'll have a remote proctor, or if you take it in person, you'll have a proctor there as well. Once you're done with the exam, you'll typically receive your score within 3 to 5 business days. However, in certain instances, it may take up to 20 days. Once you receive your score, you'll be given 5 free score sends if you send your score within 48 hours of receiving your official score. After that, each score send will cost 35 USD per school. Yeah, well, that kind of concludes this presentation. I also wanted to kind of highlight what coaching would look like with me one-on-one. If you choose to pursue coaching with me, what I'll do is we'll make a personalized study plan. I'll identify targeted areas of focus for you to work. We'll also brainstorm and look at testing strategies, how to handle tricky questions. And I'll also talk you through mindset and confidence so that you can score your absolute best. If you would like to book a free intro call, you can scan the QR code there. And yeah, that concludes this information session. We went through a little fast today, but that's totally okay. I just wanted to open the floor for any questions that anyone might have. Any study tips or particular resources? That's a really good question, Priscilla. In terms of particular resources, what I recommend is using the official resources by the makers of the GMAT. So I kind of have a series of events here. This is the first one where I am just deconstructing the GMAT. My next 2 events, which will be held next week on Wednesday and the following week, next week's event will be about advanced strategies for the GMAT. And then the 1 and 2 weeks from now will be about how to kind of approach building a study plan. So what I can talk about here is in terms of particular resources, again, using the resources that are kind of written by the makers of the test exam. So you should buy the prep materials, the 6 practice tests, the first 2 are free, as well as question banks directly from GMAC. I think you can go to mba.com and those resources will be there. And kind of the reason why is if you choose to use a different testing service like Princeton Review or Kaplan for their questions, each different person writes questions slightly differently. And so if you get questions from a different service, those questions might not be 100% representative of the type of questions that you'll see in the actual test. And so to kind of account for those surprises, what I'd recommend is, again, buying those practice exams and the question banks from GMAC itself, the people who write the GMAT. In terms of study tips, the new GMAT Focus Edition was kind of designed to be very streamlined, not only in terms of the exam, it's probably the shortest standardized test out there with only 2 hours and 15 minutes of test time. it's also designed to kind of be studied for in a much shorter time frame as well. So what I recommend is for study tips, especially, take a practice test at first as a diagnostic to see where you are. And if you choose to pursue one on one coaching with me, we'll review the diagnostic results and I'll kind of identify where the areas for improvement there are. And then we'll focus on practicing and refining those skills while also making sure that your stamina and, for the rest of the exam isn't lost. I've had clients in the past who, they did really well in one section and really poorly on another section on their diagnostic test. And then we really focused on that one section that they were doing poorly on, and we were able to improve that. But they didn't really spend any time, keeping up their skill set and skill level with the other section they were doing really well on. And then they lost points there. And so I don't want that to happen to any of my clients where, you do really well on one and then it kind of flips because you're focusing on one, but you lose focus on the other. And so that's another study tip I recommend as well, is to like make sure that, if you're doing well in one section, like don't lose it. Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, if there are no more questions, it really helped me out if you left some feedback after we kind of end this session. When you exit, you'll be asked to give a thumbs up or thumbs down rating. Um, and if you give a thumbs up rating, you'll have a chance to kind of rate this event out of 5 stars. Your feedback will be greatly appreciated and it helps improve future events. So yeah, thank you so much for attending. I'll stick around if anyone else has any kind of last minute questions. But yeah, thanks so much. Hey, did you have any questions? Okay. All right. Well, thanks for coming. Yeah, and we do have I do have 2 more events where I kind of talk about advanced strategies and then talk about building a study plan in the next 2 weeks. So I think those will also be really helpful. Thank you.